my name is Shimon Kelly.
My name's Georgia Burton.
I'm Yishai Weiler.
My name is Chloe Kay.
I am the grandson of Henrietta Kelly, who was born, grew up in Poland and survived the Holocaust and Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. After the war, she came to London where she rebuilt herself a new life.
I am the granddaughter of Harry Ulmer, the survivor of numerous different concentration camps in Poland and throughout the territory, and he moved to Britain after he was liberated by the Russians from Theresienstadt as one of the boys and settled here to make his new life.
My grandmother came to Switzerland in April 1939 with the Kindertransport. Her sister also came with her on the Kindertransport, but her father, her mother and her brother all did not survive the Holocaust.
I'm the granddaughter of David Herman, who grew up in Munkac in Czechoslovakia and survived 5 concentration camps, was sent to the UK in a group now known as The Boys, married Olive Herman and left a great legacy, but sadly is no longer with us today.
Life before for her was already not the normal life. She was born in 1930, and from 1933 and especially 1935 there were very strict regulations in Germany limiting the life of Jewish people. They had to leave school and were then taught only by the Jewish community. In the few months before she left, her dad was away in Dachau, and then especially her brother was active in keeping up the community life.
My grandpa David was just 12 years old when his life began to change with the rise of the Nazis in Munkac. He was just 16 when the ghetto was established and he moved there with his family. Then when he was 17 years old, he was told to evacuate the ghetto, and they were all the Jews were forced onto cattle trucks and were taken to Auschwitz. And on the platform in Auschwitz, that was the last time where he saw his parents. He went through 5 concentration camps, starting with Auschwitz and ending in Theresienstadt, where he was liberated and was very ill with typhus.
My grandma and her mum were told that if they paid a certain amount of money or valuables, they'd be put on a train to Switzerland and to safety, but this was a lie. They got on a train and ended up in Bergen-Belsen camp. They must have arrived there late 1943, early 44.
Transferred to Buchenwald, and he said that after that he was given fresh clothes there, and he particularly said it was like a holiday camp.
She also told me that she learnt to first write the alphabet in camp. She spoke a lot about the queue to get food. She said there was almost some sort of social hierarchy. The most important people would queue up first to get their soup and bread, and because my great-grandma, my grandma's mum, was the wife of a rabbi, that was considered quite important in the barrack, and so she would queue up near the front along with, a former lawyer and a former doctor.
He found his brother Abi, and they helped each other survive, and they helped each other throughout the death march. I don't think my grandpa would have survived without his help.
Our parents told us, that my grandmother came from Germany with the Kindertransport. It's quite from very young on. As we got older, we got to know more details, and also it was told to us more about the people who did not survive, and not only about the stories of the people who did survive.
I honestly don't remember finding out about it. It was just something that I've always grown up with.
My grandpa's experience in the Holocaust, I don't think it was exactly something I discovered one day. Well, I don't remember having a specific reaction. All of that information came to me through my mother and my aunt, who edited and then published the memoirs that my grandpa wrote. It's called David's Story. Proofreading it and things like that is when I learned really the detail of my grandpa's story. And when I did, I was shocked. I was extremely sad.
So my grandma, when she was in the camp, had actually written quite a bit of poetry, or written a bit of poetry based on her experiences in the camp. And now she's actually writing a book. She's writing her memoirs.
When my grandpa told me this story about his time in the Holocaust, something that particularly stood out was just the hardships that he went through.
I never really understood the gravity of it and actually how amazing and brave and strong my grandpa was.
But there is still that sort of acknowledgement of our family history, which sort of runs through all of us, I suppose. Although we all respond to it in different ways, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, we're individuals.
When I think about or tell the stories, I just feel affected and kind of sad of the whole situation, how it happened, and the whole story is not. It's not possible to explain it rationally what exactly happened. What I'm left most with is afterwards quite a confusion that I can't really order my thoughts about it.
It's quite a hard thing for me to get my head around.
Still, I'm sort of in disbelief. I can't really believe that my grandpa at such a young age went through all of that, especially when I was 17 and 18 years old, because those were the ages that he went through these camps. I guess that's when I really understood, thinking that my grandpa was my age.
Of course, as Holocaust survivors pass away, sadly, second, third generation survivors, I think, should take up that mantle, that responsibility, because at the end of the day, that's all we're really going to have left.
To be a third generation speaker just means that I feel I have a duty to spread my grandpa's story, and that it's something that's so ingrained in my life and my family's life.
It's very important to me to be a third generation of a Holocaust survivor, and I do feel like it's my duty to educate others about the Holocaust and my grandpa's individual story.
I've only heard her speak publicly once, and it was very moving to hear her speak. But yeah, I feel some sort of responsibility to talk to other people, to tell her story, communicate it as an example of what's happened, and to allow people to better understand the horrors that took place during the Holocaust.
It is so powerful to hear the testimony of the survivor. It's so powerful to hear my grandpa's, but it's so powerful to hear anyone's testimony. He has made it his mission that now what he wants to do is just talk to different schools, talk to universities. He thinks it's one of the most powerful things to do. I've really tried to take on his message and also spread his story. Yeah, my grandpa is such an inspiration.
We honour him, we really do honour him as much as we can.
She's a massive part of my life. Her ability to remember the stories of all her family members still is quite marvelling, and it's nice that to some extent that all still lives on.
Not only has my grandpa's big appetite been transferred through generations, also his love for languages. I love languages, I study languages at university, so does my sister Emily, so do and did my other cousins.
I definitely feel proud of my grandma, proud that she's survived and that she's managed to build an amazing life for herself, and to go on and become a lawyer and graduate law in the 50s and 60s as a woman is pioneering and almost revolutionary in of itself.
I was thinking, what am I doing? Why am I not speaking more about my grandfather? Yes, he has his book, but there's so much more that can be done to spread his story. I decided to take it upon myself, and I contacted some schools in Leeds, that's where I go to university, and I offered to volunteer and give a presentation about my grandpa. I won't forget though, at this primary school that I spoke at in Leeds, a young boy put his hand up and said, "I know this isn't the question, but I just want to say your grandpa was very, very brave."
I always do think about how important these talks are to different generations of people and how it really shapes their lives. I've had actually quite a few people coming up to me and telling me that they've heard my grandpa's testimony and how they've been inspired to do something.
I'm still learning more and more every time I give talks about my grandpa, or every time I talk to someone or I talk to the boys. So yeah, I'm still understanding my grandpa's story.
Every time when I hear his story, I learn a different message from it. I'm very proud that my grandpa has been able to share his story, as it's obviously something that's extremely hard for him.
It also shows that, or made me realize that being Jewish is not only saying that I'm part or feeling that I'm part of a community, but also making the community happen. It has made my Jewish identity one which is very more active.
The main way that the Holocaust can always be remembered is through education and discussion and people sharing real stories of individuals who endured the concentration camps.
It's always the personal stories, it's the human individual connections that really allow us to communicate the horrors of the Holocaust. If you throw statistics at people, that often tends to go in one ear and out the other, but if you try and communicate story to portray what's happened, that's always most effective. And if you can bring in a personal link, your family connection, then that's massively effective.
I think what is very helpful is having one person, one story which we can connect to.
We often learn about these big numbers, but I feel like when I talked about my personal story of my grandpa and what he went through in my classes, it kind of brought the human aspect to it. It's really up to us as the younger generations to be sharing these personal stories.
That can be done in a classroom by volunteers like me or the elder generation talking to students. But that can even just be done through basic day-to-day awareness.
So that when there's questions that come up in the future during these talks, I'm able to answer these questions on behalf of him. And I want to be doing that in the future. But also there's so much more that can be done. Memorialisation doesn't need to happen by listening firsthand to a testimony. By just handing out candles at the time of Holocaust Memorial Day with a short testimony of someone in the student union, or having different films on or documentaries that talk about the Holocaust. Social media is so important that if people share stuff on social media and there are campaigns through social media, then that can also be really impactful.
The Holocaust and discrimination and racism in this way do not only just affect one person, but the emotions and the trauma and survivor's guilt and repression are all actually passed through generations, and that's something that people don't really understand. I don't think there's only one thing that I think should be taken away from my grandpa's stories or similar stories.
If my grandpa could tell people to take one thing away from his testimony, it would be to stand up against hatred. If we also learn about other genocides as well during this time.
I also feel like it's my duty to stand up for minorities.
We say never again, but it is happening again.
For some of us, we don't really think about these things often, especially for non-Jews for whom this isn't part of their life or their culture, to therefore take just a day or two every year or a week to concentrate, to focus on remembering and educating ourselves and educating other people about what happened during the Holocaust is so important. Days like Yom HaShoah or International Holocaust Memorial Day are only going to become, in my opinion, more important as we head on into the future.
Yes, I 100% that days like Yom HaShoah and Holocaust Memorial Days are the days that we should really be commemorating the lives of survivors, and especially those who perished and whose lives were lost.
Whilst it's very important to commemorate Yom HaShoah and to commemorate everyone that died in the Holocaust, that's not the final step. There's a step after that, which is to bring this to our lives. We're going to use that message in our lives, and we're going to live better lives when we stand up for what we believe in. We try our best in everything we go. If there's hatred, we go against it.
What's survival for if there's nothing left to survive for afterwards?